So we will be joined by Glen MacPherson a little bit later on to talk about those weird hums, and we'll take your calls on them too as well. If you've had it happen where you are, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also join us in the chat room. John can see the stuff in the chat. Matt's working on getting everything else up and running, but for now, we'll just work with what we have. And then also later on in the show, we'll be joined by our friend Ross McHugh, who you've heard him on the show before. He's been on as a caller. We're going to have him come into the studio and hang out and talk about some of the stuff. Matt, I see it's going now. Matt's a genius. He figures it all out.
Yes. People are saying, here we go. It's on.
So you know what we're going to do, Matt? We're just going to pretend like we just started the show. So good evening, welcome to Spooky South Coast. No, people will catch up with what's going on in the video. So we will be joined by Glen MacPherson coming up in just a little while to talk about those mysterious hums that have been heard all over the world. And then later on in the show, we'll be joined by our friend Ross McHugh, who will share with us some of his experiences out in the world of the paranormal. And he's also a musician. And we'll probably talk to him a little bit about that stuff as well. And we'll take your calls throughout the course of the show, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. I'd tell you to, you could email and all that stuff. But, well, email works. I get that on my phone. spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. You can tweet us at SpookySC. I wouldn't use hashtags tonight because I won't be able to follow along.
This is true.
We're just going to make the most out of it, of what we have. And we'll power our way through it.
I'll tell you, it's weird sitting here with nobody to the left.
Right. Well, imagine when you're here and you're the only person here. That's when it's really. I've done some of those shows too.
Yeah, that's got to be
where it's just me and I'm talking to myself. I think people are listening, but I'm not sure. So in effect, I'm just talking to myself. And when I do those shows, I do them Art Bell style.
Like, oh, really?
I come in here and I turn off the TV and I turn off all the lights and I just sit here in the dark and I talk about weird things. So if I'm going to be alone, I'm going to make sure that I, creep myself out because I'm the only one listening. So one of the things that I wanted to do before we get into the talk with Glen MacPherson about the hums is, hang on, I'm going to roll back. There's been a very couple of interesting news stories that have been in the news this week, and I wanted to talk about these a little bit with the audience, and we can get your thoughts on them as well, John. So this one is from New York. Peggy Bruner, this comes from the New York Daily News. Peggy Bruner was preparing dinner when her phone began ringing Sunday night. She grabbed her cell and stopped cold the moment she saw the name that flashed on the screen. Desi, as in Desiree Gibbon, her 26-year-old niece, who was murdered in Jamaica 2 months ago. The slain Queens woman's cell phone was never recovered and her killing remains unsolved. I got goosebumps from my head to my toes, Brunner told the Daily News, but her hope for a breakthrough was dashed when she answered the call at precisely 5:26 p.m. and was met by silence on the other end. Brunner missed a second call from Gibbon's phone some 6 hours later at 11:43. When she tried to call back, Brunner got the message she hears anytime she dials her niece's number: "This phone is not working." This is a longer story than I realized. The mysterious calls add a fresh layer of intrigue to a case that has stumped local authorities and left Gibbons' family frustrated over the slow-moving investigation. So now they have been in contact with the authorities. The authorities say they had no idea where the cell phone was. She had a local phone with her that she was using, but when she left the hotel, she was only carrying her American cell phone. So this phone, which was inactive while she was there, she had one that would get signal. A lot of us do that when we travel. We get like a disposable phone, something that's just a single use kind of thing. And so she left with just her regular cell phone on her, which shouldn't be able to make calls from where it was. So they're getting these calls and they're thinking that it might be from whoever it was that took her,
yep,
trying to use the phone, or somebody found the phone and is like calling home, like just trying to find somebody that might know whose phone it is. So this was given to me by Phil Paleologos, the morning show host here at WBSM, and he wrote a note on it. He has a hunch that the call is actually coming from the spirit of Desiree Gibbon, the woman who was murdered. This wouldn't be the first time that I've heard of this.
I was just going to say that. I've heard that before. People have told me, when we would have the group and go into an investigation, we'd ask things that went on, and I've had different places say, or people say, well, one thing that happened, our home phone kept getting these phone calls, and the name would come up and it was from somebody that passed away in our family, and they shouldn't be calling us. So it's something I've heard before.
And I actually almost wrote a whole book about it because there was enough stories that I had heard of the same thing. Some with caller ID now, it makes the stories all the more interesting because now when it's coming from somebody's phone. And there's been stories where I've heard of, I already took that person's phone after they died and gave it to somebody else. Or we got rid of the phone, or the really creepy stories are, I know where that phone is. It's sitting in the drawer without a battery in it. But there's stories like that happen where people say there's no way that anybody else could have possibly have made that call and have it come from that person's caller ID. But even before that, there were stories of people who, before the days of cell phones and caller ID, where people would get a phone call, usually at weird hours, or maybe at a time when they were thinking about somebody who had passed away, the phone would ring, and they would pick up the phone, and that person's voice would be on the other end. So these spirits were able to somehow, some way, reach out over these telephone lines and be able to communicate with this person. I'm just going to turn down my volume here on my phone.
We're having an interesting night. Yeah,
it was down. I don't know why. Maybe it's the same thing we're talking about right here. But I'm trying to open this up so I can see the chat myself. So, these stories have been prevalent for a long, long time. D. Scott Rogo actually wrote a book about it, I think in the 70s or the early 80s, where he researched a bunch of these cases. So it's not anything that's unheard of. It's not anything that is new to paranormal researchers.
No.
It's just that as the technology has changed, the way that spirits are communicating via the telephone has changed.
Well, there is something funny, though, that can be added to this. And I've noticed it on mine, and I'm sure with your cell phone you might have it, or anybody in the chat. There's certain different programs that you can get for like caller IDs on your phone now. And the one that I have, if somebody calls me, or even if I call them and I do not have their number saved, it actually shows the name of the person that had it before. Like, for instance, the other day I called a restaurant to get an order on my way home. When I called, the number actually came up to a registered person instead of that business. And it showed their Facebook picture beside it. So maybe something like that, somebody's calling in from that number by accident, maybe misdialed, but it's coming up under somebody else.
Yeah, see, I got really weirded out when my phone was ringing one day and the caller ID said scam likely.
Yep.
I'm like, wow, my phone already can figure out when it's a scam call. That's pretty. Yep. And now I realize I get that call like 7-8 times a day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm glad it's filtering out. I hope it isn't somebody that really wants to reach me. Like it's scam likely, but it's actually like my grandmother.
Yeah, right.
My grandmother's dead, so that'd be a ghost call too. And another story that happened locally here as well that I want to share. And I was gonna take because we have this in the WBSM News. I was gonna take the edited version of this and read it, but there's so many weird details in the story that I just want to give it to you as is. And this comes from the Brockton Enterprise. It was written by Sarah Klein. East Bridgewater women charged in voodoo assault. Two East Bridgewater women tied up, burned, and disfigured a 5-year-old Randolph girl to rid her of a demon that was making her misbehave, according to East Bridgewater police. The women, who were facing multiple assault charges, also threatened to cut off the head of the girl's 8-year-old brother and what police described as Haitian voodoo rituals inside a home at 31 West Union Street in East Bridgewater. The ritual was done upon the mother's request, police said. Peggy Labossiere, 51, and her sister Rachel Hilaire, 40, were held without bail Monday after pleading not guilty during their arraignments in Brockton District Court on charges of mayhem, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, assault and battery on a child with injury, indecent assault and battery on a child under age 14, and threatening to commit a crime, that being murder. The women, who were arrested January 26th, appeared briefly again Thursday in court for a hearing to determine how dangerous they are. That hearing was continued. In mid-January, East Bridgewater police were called by Randolph police to perform a health and welfare check on a Randolph woman and her 2 young children, a 5-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. The two had been staying with Labossiere and Hilaire at their apartment in East Bridgewater, according to the police. Labossiere is a client of the mother, who is a hairstylist. Labossiere and Hilaire are identified as sisters in the police report. At the East Bridgewater residence, police found the mother and children. The girl had a large third-degree burn across her face, according to the police. The mother told police her daughter had woken up with the burn a few days earlier and that it was caused by a demon leaving the girl's body. The mother said she is of Haitian descent and believes in the religion of voodoo, which originated in Haiti in the 18th century and is centered around the worship of spirits. During a subsequent interview with children, the girl told police that she, her brother, and mother went to Labossiere's house in East Bridgewater for a sleepover, where they stayed for multiple days and slept on air mattresses. While there, the sisters tied down the girl on 2 occasions, securing her hands to a stick above her head and tying her feet together so she formed a cross. The victim stated that Labossiere would lean over her and kiss her all around her face like a snake and used a pointy object like a needle to cut her on the arm and collar area. Labossiere cut her so many times enough that she bled. Labossiere blew fire over the girl's face using a stick on fire as the mother and Hilaire held the girl down, the boy told police. While tied up, Labossiere put water and an unknown substance that looked like it came from a green lemon on the girl's eyes, which stung, the girl told police. The woman left her like that until her mother returned from work. The report did not specify how long she was tied up. In addition, Labossiere threatened to cut off the boy's head using a machete, as she stated in the report. At one point, Labossiere held a long stick to his throat, making it hard for the boy to breathe. She made the boy undress and rubbed his entire body with a plant-like substance and blew fire over him. He stated that she, Labossiere, told him he wanted to have sex with girls. Both siblings told police that they did not know why these things were done to them. East Bridgewater Police Deputy Chief Paul O'Brien said cases like this involving voodoo are rare. Once police found the children at the residence, they were taken to the hospital. Both smelled of smoke. Doctors found a piece of string tied around the girl's body, and a doctor said the burn on the girl's face would be a permanent disfigurement. The children were taken into custody by the Department of Children and Families. The mother was evaluated at a Brockton hospital and then sent to Pembroke Hospital for mental health treatment. At this time, there were no criminal charges being filed against the mother. So they did try to say that they denied threatening the boy with the knife. They denied rubbing the boy or putting a stick to his throat. They did say they performed cleansing baths on the children, which included putting frankincense and eucalyptus oils and sea salt on their bodies while burning myrrh. And so they say that it was the oils that caused the fire on the girl's body. But Labossiere further stated they performed this for friends and family members in the past, and that children are susceptible to the burning when an evil spirit leaves the body. So that's a pretty messed up story. That's why I wanted to read the details of it, because
it's just amazing but sick at the same time. Amazing that somebody would do that to kids, but sick and twisted at the same time that they would do something like that.
And it sounds like, these women, all 3 of them, the 2 sisters that conducted the ritual and the mother, it sounds like they all believe in the power of it, and that they thought that this girl was really just misbehaving because she had a demon inside of her.
We've talked about this before, personally, and once or twice on the air, but there's so much of that going around now, even in the paranormal field, that you get these people that first thing they run into is, oh, it's a demon, it's this or that inside there, we got to do an exorcism on them, to come to find out it is some type of mental illness, or it's maybe that they weren't taking the meds that they were supposed to be taking because they have bipolar or schizophrenia, something like that, and that's what's making them do this. It's not a demon per se. It's just crazy that people jump to that conclusion right away instead of actually using their head and doing a little bit of research to figure out maybe the obvious sides of things.
Well, one of the things that worries me is that when it comes to that level of belief, it's more powerful than anything. A true faith in something is probably going to be more powerful than any rationale that you try to tell the people. So these, the doctors that are now involved in this, the mothers under mental health observation, the police, the authorities, the judge, whoever, they can tell these folks involved all they want that what they did was wrong. But if they firmly believe that what they did was right, then it's going to stay that way, and they're not going to be able to make them see another side, because that power of belief becomes so powerful, it becomes all-encompassing.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The power of, like you said, the belief, but whatever they believe in, whether it be God or this or that, that is, and a perfect example is that TV show Waco, about the whole thing. He believes so strongly that he was the second coming of Jesus or the Messiah of Jesus, whatever you want to put it. he was able to convince everybody to believe him. So if your belief in faith is that strong, who knows? You can't change that person's thought on that.
And there's also the argument that says just because what they did was illegal doesn't mean that it was wrong. I mean,
And
some
that
people might
religion-
argue that there was a demon that was,
Yeah.
who are we to say that there wasn't a demon that was controlling?
And in that specific religion, or whatever you want to call it, they might believe that that's the proper way to take care of it and do things. So, who are we to say that that's not the right way? Things can change so crazy when it comes to dealing with people like that. And I know I've talked to you in the past about cases that we've dealt with, but we had one. We ended up having to do that and deal with a case when that came in, and where the family literally thought the guy was possessed by a demon, and he was hanging his baby out a second floor window. And we actually had a mutual friend of ours that was involved with the case come up, and she did a psychiatric evaluation of the guy, and come to find out he wasn't on his meds. And this whole other time, the first investigators that were there were telling him, "Oh no, it's a demon. We got to do an exorcism on you." And it's just crazy, once we were able to get the guy into the right treatment that he needed and got him checked out, he got to the hospital, got back on his meds, and things were working great for him from the last time we talked to him. On a case like that, we always like to check back with the family and see what's going on. And as last I know, he was doing good. He was taking his meds, and thank God we were able to get there before these other people actually tried doing the exorcism, which had no right, by the way, to do it. He was actually able to, take care of it and take care of himself and get away from the other people. So it worked out pretty well with that. But as for, doing hoodoo or voodoo or any of that, whatever they believe in, that's what they're going to do. They're going to believe in their faith and think that's what it is. So it's a very weird situation when you bring kids like that into it and get anybody involved.
Well, I don't know what's going on here. I'm trying to call the guest that's supposed to be joining us, and I don't have any. I have a phone, but I can't make long distance calls all of a sudden, and I don't know why that is, because the VIP line, which is what we call everybody on, is not working. It's not even coming into the system.
Really?
And I know they're putting in a new phone system here. We're getting these fancy new phones. I don't think they put a jack in here yet, but we're getting these fancy new computerized phone system that's supposed to tie in the entire building. So I don't know if they're taking down some of those lines and putting them in, but basically I'm going to try and see if he can call us, because this is. I'm just going to try and type as I'm talking here. But this is definitely not what I was expecting.
It makes for an interesting night with the phone lines not working, your internet not working on the other computer. It definitely makes for an interesting night to see what's going to happen.
So I sent him the email. We'll see if he can call us, and if he can, we'll have that discussion. If not, I know Ross is here.
Is he?
He went next door with his guest that's with him, so they will be here with us at some point. So we can have the show. Matt was asking me if we fired off a commercial, and I said no. So I hope something didn't go over there, because nothing should be firing off. This is where if Stephanie was here, she'd be talking about Mercury retrograde. Yes. Whether it's Mercury retrograde or not, I don't know. But this is where she'd be bringing it up anyway.
Well, we did just have that new blue moon that's only happening 1 in a million years or something.
Right. I don't know what's going on tonight. But
yeah.
As far as I know, we're on the radio. Nobody's called up and said, hey, But then again, maybe the phones aren't working.
This is true too. But I mean, people, are in the chat room saying they hear us, so everything's good across that too.
It's entirely possible that they came in here and started doing work on the system. They're like, nobody's here on the weekends. After 1 o'clock on
we don't
Saturday,
need that.
Yeah, they totally forget that we're here. All right, the phone is ringing. So let's see if we can bring this caller in. Let me make sure I have both my pots up for this. All right. Let's see. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast. Is this Glenn?
It is. Hi, Tim.
Hello. Thank you so much for calling in. I'm sorry that we couldn't call you directly.
Oh, almost guaranteed we're going to have these technical issues, aren't we?
Oh, so is it your fault? Does this happen with when you do interviews?
Oh, well, I mean, after about 30 or 40 or 50 of these, I pretty much have experienced it all now.
Well, I'm pretty excited then that it's not anything I'm doing, so I won't get fired over this, which is always a possibility. But so I wanted to talk to you because I saw the story come across the other day that there's actually been numerous reports of these, and I'm sorry, I would give you a nice good introduction because that's all on the internet, which I can't seem to access right now. But
Right.
before we get into discussion, just give everybody a little bit of your background.
Sure. Well, my own personal, professional, and academic background is that for about 30 years I've been a high school teacher of physics and mathematics, calculus, psychology, biology, that sort of thing. I've trained mathematics teachers at University of British Columbia for about 16 years, and I still do contract work with them. The reason why we're talking and what has brought me to a bit more public limelight is my work with the World Hum Map and Database Project.
And this is...
And sorry, before we continue, we're getting a little bit of feedback back in my ear, but I'll see if I can turn my volume and control that. So please go ahead.
Sure, I'm going to try and pull some things down on my end as well. This is something that has been discussed for... We've been doing this show now. We just celebrated our 12th anniversary, and we've probably been hearing about this for at least half of those years here in this local area. That people will report hearing this hum, and it's not just it's not just something that is a vibration or something that you feel. It's something that has a physical impact on your body.
Well, I think we need to sort out quite a few things here in the time that we have. First of all, the worldwide hum is reasonably well established now through the documentation that I've been involved in, our mapping project and database project at www.thehum.info. And the hum was first reported in a widespread and reliable way out of England in roughly the mid to late 1960s, and then in the United States roughly in the mid to late 1980s, most famously in Taos, New Mexico, and Kokomo, Indiana, and Hueytown, Alabama, those sorts of places. But now with the data we have, we can see this is a worldwide phenomenon. And we'd like to separate it from some of the pseudoscientific and a bit more ridiculous sort of commentary that seems to surround mystery sounds in general and sky trumpets and Gabriel's horns and all those sorts of things.
But this is something that is, we're not talking about just like, I know that a lot of folks, as they get older, I work in radio, I tend to get this like ringing in my ears over time. And as people get older, they might get bouts of tinnitus and they might hear these little bits of ringing, but this isn't something like that. This is something that when you hear it, you know that it's happening.
Well, tinnitus is an important part of the discussion, and the reason why is because even though it's quite a different phenomenon than the world hum, tinnitus is self-reported. And one thing that I like to do in all these interviews, wherever I've gone, is that I like to insist at some point, and we can do this right now, is that I like to ask the radio host two questions, if you would indulge me.
Sure.
Number one, do you believe that do you believe that tinnitus is real?
I do.
Number two, why do you believe it's real?
That's a good question.
I would have to say,
and the very fact that you paused,
right,
was that moment where you understood the implication, which is that tinnitus is self-reported. So the next logical point is, if we believe people who report a high-frequency ringing noise, why would we not believe people who report a low-frequency humming noise? And the answer is simply because fewer people experience it. The classic description, by the way, if your listeners aren't aware, is that the hum sounds just like a idling vehicle outside one's home, and it's louder at night than during the day. and it's louder indoors than outdoors. Those are the primary characteristics, but it has other features as well.
So that's that's been consistent with all the reports going all the way back to when it was first reported in the 60s?
Yeah, now, as it turns out, I'm just looking at New Bedford right now on the World Hum map, and it's kind of interesting. New Bedford has a population of around 95,000, if Wikipedia is correct, and Fall River is a little bit smaller at about 80-odd thousand.
Right.
What's really interesting is they're actually the World Hum is underreported in your particular location. Like the worldwide hum seems to follow population density. That's why the eastern seaboard of the U.S. tends to be so densely packed, and England has a spectacular number of hum reports. But in your area, it seems to be somewhat underreported, and that's sort of interesting. This is the first time I've looked at the map in this area. But yeah, the what we're hearing now and all the reports that I get, and I have over 17,000 entries on the database, they're all largely consistent about what these people are experiencing. And these people comprise a lot of very ordinary and everyday people, and some very serious people as well, and scientists and doctors and lawyers and all that sort of thing.
So with this map and the reporting that's been done here, how have these reports come in? Are these examples of the hum being reported that you found yourself? Is this people have been submitting these?
No. In the spring of 2012, when I first became aware of this noise, I embarked, because of my background in science and mathematics, I just assumed there was a logical source for it. And it took me on a really interesting journey. And those details are available elsewhere online if people are interested. But what it did ultimately is brought me to the internet and doing a search. And I discovered that this is a widely reported phenomenon, but unfortunately it's been associated with all kinds of ridiculous conspiracy and pseudoscience. And I thought that it was very much time for a serious and organized forum for discussing it, documenting it, mapping it, and ultimately leading toward an explanation for it.
See, because I work in the news department here during the week, and as part of that, we share our news stories in different local groups in the New Bedford and Fall River area, like different social media groups, Facebook groups, things like that. And I see a lot of people in there reporting these hums, reporting hearing these. So I think it's just a matter of they haven't known about your site to go and make those reports. And now that they will, I think you're going to see a little bit of an explosion in this area of reports coming in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the impact of this show has on reports from that area. But I would also stress that there are also a large number of perfectly everyday explanations for hums, and I'll use lowercase h for that. Everything from a fridge motor to marine traffic, to even float planes flying overhead, to electrical transformers. The point is, once we eliminate all of these obvious sources, we seem to be left with a generic worldwide phenomena, which is what I'm studying and what various people before me have also studied. Now, in the age of the internet and this type of radio call-in show, we can spread the awareness of this phenomena and to normalize it, and again, crucially, to separate it from a lot of the hoaxes and pranks and kind of pseudoscientific silliness that seems to permeate this topic for some reason.
So if just the average person is listening and they experience this hum, or they think they've experienced this hum, what is the process that they should go through themselves before they think that it's something worth reporting to your site?
Well, first, again, the classic description, a low-frequency humming or rumbling or droning, grinding sound. Louder at night than during the day, louder indoors than out, and also the sound can usually be effectively masked with background noise like a fan, like a bathroom fan or something like that. Some people find that if they let me give you an example of one diagnostic test that seems to separate out a lot of these hums. If the person just exhales very loudly or shakes their head for 2 or 3 seconds, and if they find that this stops the noise briefly, like for half a second, and then it quickly returns, this is almost certainly the world hum that we're then dealing with. If they go to the hum.info, they can see the link where they can view the world hum map and the database, and of course the link where they can enter their information. I have a new survey out now which is detailed and now goes after information that we should have been asking for the last 4 or 5 years. But with some external input from a couple of working scientists, I've got this survey form to the point where I think now we're gathering some really crucial data. But some really interesting results have already come out. And then, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly share one of them with you.
Sure.
We found that ambidextrous people, just to clarify, for the people who are sort of equally left and right-handed, they are greatly overrepresented amongst people who hear, like hum hearers, the people who hear the worldwide hum. About 55% of the hearers are male. The average and mean and median age is roughly 40 to 41 years of age. And we are still digging to try to separate out other interesting statistics, which might give us some clues. We've got 4 working theories now that we think explain what the hum might be, and we're just methodically working through those theories, and we're pretty sure that we're going to arrive at a solution before long.
And was that anything that you can share with us? What it may be?
Yeah. The Dr. David Deming in 2004 suggested that powerful VLF military transmitters, used primarily by the American Navy, the Russian Navy, and China. Those very low frequency radio transmitters were the source, because that would help explain the timing and a few other details that I'll spare the listener. So I actually built a special box, a special unit, that was designed to block this particular frequency of radio waves, and I got in the box. Now, this box is what caused Inside Edition and Coast to Coast AM and a few other the larger people to get interest. It's captured some of the public's imagination, but the part that they didn't report very broadly is that blocking unit failed. In other words, I'm now reasonably convinced that electromagnetic radiation is not the cause of this phenomenon, and I think now the most likely answer is the second one I'm turning to, which is that the hum is an internal medical condition similar to tinnitus, but it presents itself much differently. Now, we don't know why. The thing that makes that kind of unusual or odd is that the fact that why did it start in England? And why did it start when it did? And so we think maybe there could be a connection to either particular medications, prescription medications, certain environmental exposures. We're still speculating on that one, but the next thing I am going to turn to is that notion that it's an internally generated sound. Again, like tinnitus, but probably on some different auditory pathway.
So if that's the case, then are the reports that you've gotten, are you getting multiple reports in the same region from different people who are experiencing it at the same time?
Yeah, and what's crucial to note is that one of the questions I ask is as I ask people to actually match the tone. We have an online generator, and we get people to lower or raise the tone until it matches what they hear. And we'll find that numbers of individuals who live very close to each other are reporting that they are perceiving different frequencies. For anyone who has the audio background, I'll mention that I perceive the hum at a roughly 56.5 hertz. Now that hertz, that's an audio frequency, not an EM frequency. But wherever I travel in North America, after about 3 days, the hum returns at about the same frequency. And I just mentioned that air travel tends to disrupt the hum for anywhere from 3 to 4 days. That's something else that we've discovered.
Well, that's not uncommon. I mean, the first time I ever flew was only a few years ago, and it was cross country, and it took me a while, more than a day, to be able to kind of re-accentuate myself to ground pressure, to have my ears pop and to no longer feel like it had a physical toll on me, the descent coming down, and it took me a few days to adjust.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, if maybe that's a similar type of physical impact that it takes that much time to readjust.
It's actually been studied. There's a German researcher by the name of Frosch, And he's discovered that air travel also disrupts what are known as autoacoustic emissions, thereby suggesting, or therefore suggesting, that the hum and autoacoustic emissions may involve some of the same structures. He and a few others have suggested that particular structures in the ear, known as the semicircular canals, in response to air pressure changes like flying or spending time at high altitude, may interfere or interact with the hum. So there are people who are turning their research sites into that portion of the auditory system, and with any luck, before too long, I can convince a serious university or private lab to take this over with proper equipment and proper funding so that I can get on with my life. I mean,
Right.
quite frankly.
Well, I mean, just looking at the sheer volume of reports that have come in, and as you mentioned, the depths of the area being along the eastern seaboard. I mean, you're talking about people who are operating at sea level or just slightly above. So it's but you also have people who are at other altitudes that are experiencing this. People who are in Europe who are at higher altitudes that are experiencing this. So, everybody's body that may be having these symptoms are at different physical positioning. So it's not like it's anything that would be based on, maybe the physical makeup of this person. If you put them at this altitude or put them at this altitude, like my ears will pop if I go so high. Somebody else might be able to have a little bit more
air pressure. Any human being, once they get to a particular altitude, eventually things will stabilize. It is that change in pressure which it's suspected is behind this. Now, until my project got up and running, there was an assumption that people who heard the hum only in particular regions and locations. Now, we know now that that's not the case. And the vast majority of people who travel report that they will hear the hum roughly in the same way no matter where they go. So this world hum is not caused by a standard local sound. It is caused by something else. And so, again, as you point out, the huge variety of geographical locations, altitudes, age, gender, it really distributes wherever we find people, we find people who hear the worldwide hum.
So we have a couple questions that are in the chat room, and
Sure.
One is they asked if the audio attacks in Cuba could be related or not to this hum.
I was interviewed for journal, fairly big Canadian journal on this topic, and the reason they called me was not so much the connection to the world hum, but because in all my work, I've managed to have a sort of a working vocabulary and knowledge of a lot of audio topics. I think it's clear that there was some sort of sonic weaponry being operated there, and possibly ultrasonic, using localization techniques. I don't think that there's any connection to the world hum, though. No.
And then we also have one other question that did anybody ever use electronic measuring devices to actually record the sounds of the hum, or can only the witnesses report it by ear hearing it?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and there are people who have claimed to. I am of the opinion that the worldwide hum has never been recorded. Now, there's probably the most well-known recording is from a Dr. Tom Moir, M-O-I-R, out of Auckland, New Zealand. Now, I've interacted with Dr. Moore, and however, all of my inquiries to him have all gone to dead ends. And he also told me that the very phrase humdrum comes out of the Industrial Revolution of England, which it does not. And so I've written off those claims. Numbers of people, probably out of all the hundreds of emails I receive every month, usually 5 or 6 people send me recordings. And unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do with those recordings. I can do some analysis, and in some cases pick out frauds or pranks. And in some cases I can pick out simple mains hums. Like any hum that comes in at 120 hertz audio or 60 hertz audio is probably based off the electric grid. But there have been people who have attempted, including myself, by the way, using high sensitivity infrasound microphones, have actually had no luck in recording what we hear.
Well, I'm going to throw a question at you that has, and this might be a loaded question because we only have a few moments left, but this will involve some pseudoscience to it.
Sure.
And we work in the paranormal realm, and we work in ghost research, and in part of that is we record what's called electronic voice phenomena, which are disembodied voices that imprint themselves on their recordings. Some people think that they're the voice of ghosts. I don't think so, but I think that there's certainly something that is imprinting these words onto these recordings. And one of the ideas behind it is that it's something that we're projecting out ourselves, and we're not consciously aware of the fact that we're making these sounds and that we're just kind of putting them out there in the ether. Is it possible that this hum is something that's coming from us and actually going out and becoming an auditory phenomena? So it's not something that is internal, but something that we're somehow putting out and changing the vibrations around us, therefore changing the sound waves around us. Like a physical thing that we're doing.
No.
Okay. Because I think
now I mean, let's be fair. I, for example, when it comes to ghost research or other types of psychic, or if we even broaden that to talk about psychic phenomena in general, that and telekinesis and thought projection, remote viewing, I'm not claiming that these things point blank do not exist. What I'm saying is I've seen absolutely no evidence to suggest that they do. And with regard to the latter category, James Randi, as many people know, has a $1 million check waiting for anybody to demonstrate convincingly any of these phenomena.
We can have a James Randi argument another time because he's put so many restrictions and it doesn't kind of work the way that he wants it to work. But anyway, I mean, that's something we can talk about another time. I'm obsessed with the idea that people that are experiencing this ghostly phenomena, it's actually something that they're doing, that they're just, the same idea that when a Ouija board operates, that it's somebody using their, motor skills without realizing that they are. I think that this is part of what we experience with ghost research, but we can say that for another time. I do want to give you a chance though to let people know, because this is not a cheap endeavor to be able to compile all this information and keep all this information up, and it's something that you've been doing just out of your own research and out of your own pocket. There is a way for people to make a donation if they want to help with this research.
I don't openly solicit on these shows, but I'll say that.
Well, I can. I'm openly soliciting for you.
Okay, sure. That the donations will barely cover the cost of web hosting and that kind of thing. But if they go to the hum.info and if they click on who is behind this project, or if they go to the blog and click on who is behind this project, there are links there for people who wish to donate.
But the most important thing is for people to go to the site, to go to the hum.info and share their reports and share their experiences.
It's just one hum here at a time, and we will eventually wear down the walls of incredulity and apathy.
And I think
and find a solution.
I think that spreading the word out here in this listenership area will help, because, like I said, I've seen so many of these reports come across, and now people know where they can go to report them and have them all collected. So, Doctor, thank you for what you're doing, and certainly we'll be in touch in the future, and we can expand this into a much longer conversation and really get into some of the nuts and bolts. My usual co-host, one of them I will let you know in fairness, is a psychic medium, so we might have some friction there. But also, one of my co-hosts is a scientist who has looked into this on his own in the past. So I'd be interested in having a good back and forth with you guys as well.
I would enjoy that very much, and thanks for having me on, Tim.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, and we will be in touch.
Take care, bye.
Take care. That is Dr. Glen MacPherson. Again, the website is thehum.info. If you want to report. Absolutely report any experiences that you've had. Put them up there on the site. We're going to be taking a break in just a minute. When we come back on the other side, we will have Ross McHugh joining us in studio. I think John's got to take off, but we'll make Ross sit in that seat, and he can keep an eye on the chat room too. He's usually in the chat room anyway.
Exactly.
He knows how to do it.
Yeah.
So we'll get into all that as well. And when we come back on the other side too, I want to let everybody know about something that's coming up, a fundraising event. The details are still being worked out. But we will let you know how you can help a very special member of the paranormal community who is having some health issues. You might know about this already, but we're going to give you some more info. And when we come back on the other side, we'll talk about how you can help out with some medical costs associated with this beloved person, beloved creature, I guess. We'll be back with more Spooky South Coast in a minute. Tim Weisberg here, along with my new co-host for the hour. We have Ross, who's joining us.
Yes.
Ross, you are normally joining us over the phone.
Over the phone,
if you call in.
This is a different side of it for me, but this is definitely amazing.
You've been in the studio while we've done the show, though.
Yes.
So you've seen how we pretty much operate on a wing and a prayer.
Yes.
For most, and we are definitely doing
Do
that tonight. You came in, and I said the first thing I said to you is, "You're going to be running the chat room while this is going on because I don't have access. This is my internet computer for the night." So we're messed up in that regard. And then I tried to call our guest in the last hour, Dr. Glen MacPherson, who fascinating discussion about the worldwide hum, and certainly we're going to revisit that with an entire episode somewhere down the line. But I'm trying to call out to him because we were going to do the interview over Skype.
Yep.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
With no internet. So then I'm like, okay, well, we'll give him a call. And then I go to give him a call and I can't dial out on the phone line.
Oh, jeez.
So I don't. They're upgrading everything,
Yeah.
but I think they just said, "Oh yeah, you guys can do the work on the weekend because nobody's around." They forgot about Spooky South Coast.
Well, that's not
That's
good.
all right. We're gonna have nice, fancy new phones in here. We got this big TV in here now.
Yep.
Permanently installed cameras. So we're definitely moving up.
Yep.
It's just sometimes, they
They don't
plan-
have everything put together.
They don't plan the work around Spooky South Coast.
Yeah.
So that's all right because we just make do and we talk about the paranormal however we can.
Exactly.
And we are going to get into some because you're a musician and you've brought your lead singer here. Is that
Yes,
is that who's
my lead singer and
Go ahead.
co-guitar player, Dan
Introduce
Lozzi.
him.
This is the immortal Dan Lozzi from 7 Day Curse fame, local fame.
And
Also-
you yourself, people know you as Ross on the line, but you're a musician. And
Yes.
You're also a paranormal investigator.
Yes.
And you've been on a number of different trips and events with us, and we've known you quite a few years now. Yeah?
Yes.
So
3-4 years. Yeah.
And we don't, we always enjoy going out and investigating with you, but you don't only do it with us. You're are always out there looking for different adventures.
Yes.
So we're going to get into some of that coming up, but I want to let everybody know about one thing first, and I can't reveal too many details yet because we're still kind of finalizing the details. But this week we found out that there is a member of the paranormal community who is under the weather, and that would be Max Borden. Who is the official cat of the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast.
Oh, no.
Anybody that's been to the Lizzie Borden house, whether it's for an investigation, for an event, to stay overnight, for a tour, you've encountered Max most likely. He walks around like he owns the place because he does, in fact, own the place. It's Max's house, and he just lets everybody else come in and have fun there. So Max has been ill, and we're not exactly sure what is wrong with Max. Poor Leanne has been running around to different vets and having different tests done, and they can't really figure out exactly what the issue is with Max. So he is scheduled to undergo some MRI work on Monday. It was supposed to happen the other day, but they said let's wait and give it the weekend and see. So needless to say, as all this has been going on, the vet bills have been piling up for poor Max and for Leanne. So we said, how can we kind of help out with this? So we have been reaching out to a lot of our paranormal friends, and it's, listen, we've built a great network with Spooky South Coast over the years.
For sure.
All of these people that are on paranormal TV shows, like we can just pick up a phone, we can text them, we can call them, we can email them, we can get them to respond. And so what I did is I put together a group of, the paranormal celebrities, and I said, here's the situation. We want to do some kind of an auction. Who would be willing to donate things? No judgment if you can't, if you don't want to, whatever. It's a cat. So some people are like, yeah, I'm a dog person. I don't really, Some people are like, if it's a person, maybe everybody that we reached out to has gotten back to us and said, I will absolutely donate something for this auction. So we're going to work out the details. We're going to stream it live from the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. And we are going to have basically all the items that we can have will be right there. We'll put them up on camera. We'll give you a chance to know ahead of time what they are. We'll have the opening bids based on, kind of what they're worth. And we will conduct this auction style worldwide. people
That's
can
amazing.
jump into the chat room just like they can on Spooky South Coast and make bids. They can call in on the phone and make bids. We'll come up with different ways for them to be able to make bids. But our goal is to take all these donated items that people are going to be donating, and we are going to be auctioning them all off with all the proceeds going to help pay for Max's medical bills.
That's really awesome.
And one of the interesting things about it is, and I don't want to give away too many details, but of course, being the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, there's going to be some investigations involved in this. We're going to be auctioning off some spots to investigate the actual house itself with very small groups. We're going to be offering, different things and events that are going on. I don't know if I want to give away yet exactly what some of the stuff is that we can bid on, but our good friend Chip Coffee might have donated a reading.
That would be amazing.
Phone reading. I think I can give this away because I talked to Nick and Elizabeth this afternoon, but a year subscription to the Haunted Space will be one of if you haven't been to the Haunted Space on vidi.space, if you haven't gone to what they're doing there, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. So we might be, letting a little bit of a cat out of the bag, no pun intended. But these are some of the things that we'll have. And also, the news came out this week that Donald Woods and Leanne Wilbur, who run the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, they closed this week on Maplecroft. So they now officially own Maplecroft.
Well, that is amazing.
That's the house that Lizzie Borden moved to after the trial, the house where she died, which has been undergoing a great amount of renovation over the last few years. The idea is that they're going to turn it into a bed and breakfast just like the murder house, and people can have their choice of where they're going to stay when they want to come to Fall River. But there may be some investigation of Maplecroft involved.
Well, that would be very interesting.
So we'll see about all that as it all comes together. But stay tuned to Spooky South Coast and to our social media and to the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast social media, because we are going to announce it once. The problem is Leanne's been running around so much, taking care of Max and actually getting him to these vet appointments and having all these tests done that we haven't had a chance to work out and finalize the details. But hopefully all of our paranormal friends, especially the ones that are in the area that are donating, we want to have them come to the house when we do the event, because it's one thing if, somebody sends along a T-shirt. It's another thing if they can be standing there holding the T-shirt and, showing support for Max and for the Lizzie Borden house and all that. So more details to come on that.
Sounds like it will be a good fundraiser.
I hope so.
And he's part of the experience when you're there.
Really, absolutely.
Like if he comes up to you, because he's still a cat.
Right. He's very finicky about who he wants to interact with. He and I have had a very interesting relationship over the years where, he sees me so much that he recognizes me and he knows that I'm supposed to be there, but he also really doesn't care that I'm there. Yeah. He's like, no, I smell dog.
I'm a cat.
But I had a cat that looked just like him.
Really?
I had an all black cat. He was a little bit longer haired than Max, but he was the complete opposite. Whereas Max wanders around and he's always jumping in and out of the windows and everything. Not my cat. My cat would never leave the house. So
sounds like mine.
Yeah. If he lived in the Lizzie Borden house, he wouldn't last very long. He was definitely a scaredy cat. But Ross, you're not a scaredy cat.
No.
Because you have a foot in two worlds.
Yep.
In the paranormal world and the music world, neither of which is for the faint of heart.
No.
And we've been talking for a while now about the fact that there's a lot of crossover with the two.
Yes.
I mean, when did you first start to realize that there was something to, the paranormal spreading into the music world?
Well, I guess it all goes back to the the late 90s when I started, one of the bands that I was in started practicing at a local studio. I'll leave the names out, but it was apparent to several people after being there for several months that the place was extremely haunted. And I do believe at one point there was a local group that went in there and documented several different hauntings there along with the owner of the studio. And that's where it all started to begin. Because, this was a place where bands congregated, they practiced, they had, parties, and there was all sorts of different nefarious things that had taken place there, and it had just a very bad history. And it really started from those late 90s, early 2000s experiences.
And for anybody that's never been in a band, I was in a band for, an event. So I'm not really a musician, but, we went to a place where bands rehearse, and there was multiple bands that had rehearsal space in this building. And when it comes to a place like that, it's not like you're Guns N' Roses and you're renting out this place and it's just, the band being in this location rehearsing all the time. There's different bands coming in and out, different styles of music, different people, different lifestyles. And so there's a lot of different energies that are coming into these places and leaving themselves behind. But this was definitely a haunting and not so much just residual energy from what's being put out there.
Absolutely not. It was absolutely haunted. And there's several stories over the years from several different people. There was a tragic death that took place on the property, and which almost precipitously upped the energy there, and things seem to have kind of ramparted and gotten crazier there after that. And Dan and I both have stories that we've collected and heard from and experienced and shared together over the times that we were there.
So we know that Ross is a weird guy, that he's into all this stuff. But Dan,
I might be weirder.
Let me make sure I turn you on there. Try that.
How's that? Hear me?
No, I guess maybe. Are you on this one?
I don't know.
I don't know why that's not working.
Uh-oh. Should I go?
There
we
we
go.
go.
Hey,
There
There
we
you
go.
go, Dan.
Somebody turned the wrong button off. See,
All right.
we have a new guy in here in the afternoons that's learning the board, and he doesn't really leave it the way it's supposed to be. But so you're normal. You're not weird.
No, I'm weird. I'm definitely
All right,
weird.
good.
I
Then
think
you
we
fit
all
in
have
on
to
the
be
show.
to be into heavy metal somewhat,
Yeah.
So, but you were going to this rehearsal space too, and having strange experiences.
Yeah, well, the big thing is, just real quick, just to you talked about the crossover, the type of music we play. I mean, it's as extreme as it gets, and once you get into the realms of like thrash metal, grindcore, especially death metal, what we play, or even black metal, to me lyrically, there's always been those supernatural themes in that music, going back to even Black Sabbath before our genre was even completely formed. So that's where I think to me, it's like very natural we would come on a paranormal show. I mean, even lyrically, some of our stuff gets into that world. But anyway, the main thing that I told Ross we should bring up at the studio was, we saw the owner not too long ago. And one thing that would happen there is, now you see surveillance cameras everywhere. It's like a part of life. Back then, this was a new thing, having surveillance cameras up. The only place I had them was like banks and 24-hour gas stations. So he'd catch a lot of things on tape. And long story short, events would take place, and he would go check the surveillance footage, and we would see it was real, and predominantly was, people would, there was this one security guard that passed away, and people would be arguing, fighting in the hallway, because they would say, like, the word had not got around that he had died. So people didn't know he died, had been going up there, having conversations with the guy. Wow. And so whenever this would happen, Luke would be like, hey, when did it happen? What time was it? Oh, Friday night at 9:00. And he'd check the surveillance tape every time. And sure enough, whenever someone said this was happening, there'd be footage of this person or whoever said it at the time just standing in the hallway talking to nobody, right? But the really weird thing is that me and Ross just recently found out was that apparently this one security guard, after he died, he, was still watching over the place. There were 2 different accounts where people got into physical altercations with him after he had died. Neither one of them realized the guy had died. One had called the police and said, he called the police and then called him, said, if this guy comes any closer, I'm going to stab him. And he had to go and explain to him, like, after this all happened, you didn't see anything. This guy was dead. And he didn't.
But he was physically accosting them.
It blew my mind when I heard that. He was getting in it'd be like as if you held me down right now. This one guy said he was being held down by him.
Yeah.
One person they found on the ground with blood dripping out of his head. And the next day, he said he had been attacked by this guy.
So something happened to...
This was like as physical manifestation as you could possibly imagine that I personally ever even heard of. So
see, I always tell people ghosts can't hurt you. But maybe I have to rethink that now.
I've never believed that. I believe, like Ross was saying, we all hear about the tap on the shoulder, no one's there. I think they can touch you, know.
But I never thought it would get to that point where somebody's laying on the ground bloody.
Yeah.
And I guess what the particulars of the story were is there was somebody that was kind of living next door, and he was reworking some parts of the studio, doing some maybe maintenance work there. And he was walking out one day late at night to go back to his apartment, and he hit something, and he hit his head on a pipe. I believe that's what it was, one of the lower pipes, and he was like a taller guy. And the story is that he was there all night, partially unconscious, but the parts that he was conscious, he felt like this person that had passed was holding him down.
Saw him. He
saw him. Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
I don't think he was another one that was not aware
Right.
that he had died.
And I think this took place maybe like within a year or so after he had passed, and he never met this person.
Right.
So, but he described him to a T. So, which is
that's freaky
pretty
stuff.
freaky.
Yeah. And so you'd mentioned the genre of the music that you guys play is death metal. Is that
one of the bands? Yes.
So we have death metal.
So I mean, what's the difference for somebody who's not that? I mean, what how would you describe the genre of music to somebody?
It's
definitely.
If you want to go the different levels,
Yeah.
classic heavy metal would be like, I mentioned before, like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, stuff like that. Then you get into thrash metal, Exodus, Nuclear Assault,
Metallica,
Slayer, old Metallica. I'd be specific to say that. Then death metal is just it's as extreme as it can get. Bands like Suffocation, Cannibal Corpse. It's like you
really
can't understand
sounding.
anything we say, and that's done intentionally. I mean, it's just like we don't pretend like people can understand.
But it's high energy.
Oh yeah, it's fast, heavy,
and so but it has, even though you can't understand the words, it has those themes. It has those dark themes to it.
Yeah.
So I mean, some might say that you're kind of inviting with the themes that you're doing and with the energy that you're putting out. You're kind of inviting in and also giving amplification to these type of things that could be around you. I mean, Ross, when we go on events, there's people who always do protection prayers and different things. I mean, is that something that people that are in that genre will do? Do they try and make it so that, hey, this is just part of my life that I want to express musically, and I don't want to have these things kind of follow me around, and I don't want to have these type of occurrences happen to me in real life?
I would say so. I mean, I know, for me, from the paranormal side, I definitely do some kind of protection, but as well as there are bands that devote themselves to darker themes and even promoting certain types of in certain views, negative types of religion and negative types of themes. I know for us, we kind of do more of a positive spin and more of, like different themes than traditional bands.
We're very unconventional with our message
lyrics.
versus what the music sounds like.
But, and it can range from different social themes to paranormal themes to, dark and twisted things and gore themes, horror themes tend to run.
But isn't the point of making this kind of music, isn't the point of that to kind of be to get that out of you?
And definitely.
Absolutely. And to have other people who are listening to music and experiencing music be able to also kind of be like, let me throw all that stuff into this experience.
Yes. The thing where the problem arises, and we just talked about this a few weeks ago on another interview we did, I think that, I know growing up when I was into this music's very powerful. I was an angry kid. I didn't fit in or whatever, so I was attracted to it. And I think there's a lot of bands that, despite the fact they look in the crowd and see all these young kids, I don't think they're really worried if they put out a negative message. Like I always say, I'm friends with so many different bands. These bands can go out and sing about whatever they want, promote whatever they want. If it's negative, I don't care. Me personally, though, I take responsibility. I don't want some kid to do something stupid and then say it was because he saw it on one of our T-shirts or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very clear about what our message is. I'm not promoting anything negative. I try, despite how the music sounds, I'm trying to put out a message of, keep your head straight, try to stay away from drugs and bringing guns to school and all these other terrible things that are going on. I mean, and it is ironic that we're giving that message versus the music that we're putting out.
But it is too, just hearing the music and being able to play it and being able to hear it from the listener's perspective, the audience perspective, just being able to kind of let all that out musically. Like, even if it's not what's involved in the theme, but just having that release.
I'm more calm because the better the bands are going, the more calm I am, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a cathartic episode.
So, but having that kind of, it's an energy transfer. That's what it is. Yeah. And having that happen and putting that out there is going to certainly affect the environment around you.
Right. Definitely.
Right.
And it's I can understand why, you know, there's probably some people who choose to, like, if they do have the darker themes, you know, we've seen, especially huge bands, popular bands, guys like Marilyn Manson, for example, a guy who that's a persona that he played on stage, but then it becomes his life because now he's a celebrity. So he can't just go play a Marilyn Manson show. You know, Alice Cooper can't just go play an Alice Cooper show. Now he's going to be Alice 24/7.
Right.
And so when that becomes your lifestyle and when that becomes the way that you live your life, it's not just an escape for you anymore. It's not just an outlet. And now you're surrounding us. And you've probably seen bands that have been like that,
definitely.
where they, you know, they live the message.
Right. I mean, there's bands from from the Scandinavian countries where it took it to an extreme, and they were killing each other and burning churches.
But you know, too. I mean, and I'm not. Look, I'm not. Our name's Branch Davidian. That's not a happy name. I'm not sugarcoating any of this, but like I said, we're one of the few bands. Like, I think that's very aware of. We're trying to hopefully do some good with this. And again, it's not every day you're gonna find something like that.
And I would argue that, you know, that name might not necessarily be negative.
Maybe not,
because to the people who were Branch Davidians, it was a very positive part of their life.
Right. Oh yeah.
And I think as the Waco show is going to show people, you know, it's not as cut and dry as people make it out to be too.
Right.
I mean, everybody has their own viewpoint of things, and everybody has their own what they think is right and good and natural, and you know, what you think is positive or what you think is being, you know, good, I might have different degrees of that too. So, and I think that that's certainly with music, that's something that something that appeals to people, is that music is a huge gray area, and people get out of it what they get out of it.
Right.
And I think that goes for, you know, ghosts as well. I think that they might be drawn to that. So when you tell me that there's a lot of crossover with paranormal experiences and people who are in bands, you know, the first thing that I think of is the fact that you are just as much a draw to them as you would be to a living person.
Right.
Because they have the same, like, I'm connecting with this message. And you have the added benefit of, you know, you can say too, you're putting out actual sound waves, and you're putting out actually something that they can manipulate and put back to you.
Right.
I'm sure that you guys have done recording in the past.
Yes.
And have you ever had voices show up on your recordings that weren't anything that you were aware of?
Not with me.
Not in the studio, probably, but I know that.
That stuff's heavily shielded, though.
Yeah. I mean, there's been times where we actually conducted an investigation at that practice studio, and unfortunately, it's probably more than 20 years old since we got that, but I know that there was some voices on that.
I'm just thinking, you know, not that I'm calling you guys old, but you've been doing this for a while. I mean, you're probably sitting there with the Radio Shack 4-track sometimes, you know, just kind of making tapes.
We had the Maxwell tapes that we were putting them on. It wasn't sophisticated.
But the you know, and you raised the question you brought up before about, you know, the music being an outlet and you know, can amplify, you know, paranormal activity. I think a lot of the reasons why that place got even more haunted was for several reasons, and then there was just several different types of bands in there that play similar music to what we were into, that could have amplified a lot of that. At one point in time, there was so the building used to had an attic that was a kitchen. It was like a like a kitchen. It used to be a business, and for years this place was covered. They had like two different stairs that you could go up to get into different sides of the cafeteria, and the stairs were blocked by couches and just garbage. And it seemed like the more they cleared that out and made those rooms for other bands, one of the bands that used to be up there was, I think, a satanic band, ironically, and I actually got some stories from one of their happenings. The activity seemed to have increased. So,
well, let's just say that a band practice space's least best friend is the fire marshal.
How'd you know?
That's like the one guy that you don't want to see showing up.
Definitely not.
From some of these places, but you know, I think that there are some people who will look at the kind of music that you play and say, well, you know, that's that's the music of the
Invoking it.
devil.
Yes.
You're asking for this when you started playing that stuff. The same people who said, I find it really interesting when I play a record backward that I can hear things. It doesn't mean that I want to believe the things that I'm hearing, but I'm just fascinated by the scientific process of how do people figure something out like this. And so that's like, well, now you're just inviting these things to happen.
Right.
And I think that you could probably argue that it's not that you're inviting these things to happen, but it's just it could be drawn to it.
Right.
And it could be the fact that whatever it is, I mean, I don't want to say that it's evil, but negative things could be drawn to this.
Yes.
Especially with the high energy output of it. If you're a ghost, if you're a spirit, if you're some sort of creature and you crave that energy, I'd much rather go and try and suck out the energy of your band than I would, just a guy playing an acoustic set.
Right.
Right. Well, and in the medieval times, there was what they called the devil's note, which was the tritone or the diminished fifth,
Yeah.
which
Right.
was popularized by Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Used that, and I guess maybe for argument's sake, there could be something to that, but it's also too like I think it's a lot of what you put into it. I mean, we talk about in the paranormal field about Ouija boards, for example. It's what is your intent with it?
And I'm sure there's and I don't mean to, I know I'm asking a lot of questions and you have stories to share,
sure.
But we'll try and feel free to just work them in if I'm asking too many questions. But I'm sure there's also I've written a book about haunted objects, and in that book, one of the things we talked about was there was a haunted violin in Wareham, the town that I'm from,
Right.
and I'm sure that there's a lot of cases of instruments that have been said to have been haunted, and you probably know people who have had instruments where they say something weird goes, I could be home alone and all of a sudden I hear this thing playing in the other room, and stories of that nature. So I'm sure that the instruments themselves can have attachments to them as much as the places can be haunted. It's not like everybody's going out and buying something brand new. You're buying used stuff, you're picking up stuff wherever you can. I'm sure there's a lot of energies that come attached to that stuff.
Right.
Has that ever?
I can't say that's ever happened to me. I've heard of haunted instruments, but I've always tried to,
If you heard about it, you'd want it.
Yeah, definitely.
You'd be like, that's the base I'm buying next.
Unfortunately, it would probably sell on eBay next to the ghost boxes for $4,500.
Right,
possibly.
that's the problem. Especially if you're haunted on it becomes worth so much more. It's funny because being musicians, you must look at some of these devices that people are putting up there for $4,000 or $5,000 and be like, that's a $50 guitar pedal with a bunch of stuff
reverb.
wired into it. Right.
Yes. I've always been kind of interested in to try to maybe take some of those things apart and see what they're made of, but
don't pay $45,000 for it first before you do that, because you'll be pretty upset.
Yeah.
So, why don't you share with us some of the stories?
Sure. So, I did receive a couple of stories from Dave McDonough, the director of Groundhog Day, who has been a guest on the show.
Which, by the way, was yesterday. So,
yes,
how's that for?
I think they celebrated their 1 year. Yes, synchronicity. So, Dave told me a story about him and his one of his bandmates, and they were standing in their practice room. And they were trying to taunt some of these ghosts, and all of a sudden they hear children running down the hall, and after they heard some of the children running down the hall, the door flung open, and the latch for the lock from the outside hit the other gentleman in the ear, and his ear started bleeding profusely. Well, they ran to the bathroom, which was right down the hall, and right before they got to the bathroom, the sink turned on.
So they were getting, even though they got maimed by a ghost, they got a little bit of a helping hand too.
Yes. There was another time where one of the bands was practicing in the basement, and they were playing around with a strobe light, and the drummer had indicated after the strobe light went off that somebody had tapped him on the shoulder 3 times, and he had asked Dave about it, and Dave said, no, it wasn't me. And later on, they had the bass player had come over and asked them, hey, who was that guy that came in like real high shorts and like real high socks? And all of them were looking at each other. They're like, well, the door never opened once. And he had described one of the gentleman that had been seen by other people who had passed.
So I'm just thinking, real high shorts, real high socks, tapped the drummer on the shoulder with one hand. It was definitely the guy from Def Leppard, right? Except he's not dead. So
Which guy?
the drummer.
Oh yes.
Was it Rick Allen? Is that the drummer?
Yes.
I can never
believe so,
remember which
yeah.
guy is which in Def Leppard, but I know I shouldn't make one-arm jokes about drummers, but
I
but
got-
he also
also
wears the shorts with
Yes.
I got the best Def Leppard joke of all time. If you want,
Oh,
before
jeez.
we go.
the. Is it air appropriate?
Yeah, it is.
It can go over the radio.
Yeah.
All right, hit us with it.
A friend of mine, he's a little older than me. He's been to many shows over the years, concerts and stuff, and he happens to be related to this young lady sitting behind me. And I asked him one time, I'd always pester him about what bands he saw, and I'm like, hey, because I was always in awe of these bands. He'd see them at the height of their careers. I'm like, did you ever see Def Leppard play before? He goes, twice. Before and after the
Oh,
That's a great answer.
Oh man, I don't think I've ever seen. No, I've never seen them live.
Yeah.
But they're playing what? They're playing Fenway Park this year, are they?
I think so,
coming
yeah.
around soon.
Yeah.
Are
so,
they doing a retirement tour finally? Or?
No, they're never
No?
going to stop.
No, probably
You
not.
kidding? Well, that's the great thing about music, though, is that you can meet your heroes.
Right.
I mean, it's you never know who you're going to cross paths with,
Right.
and I've talked to celebrity musicians who have had paranormal stories before. In fact, you know that I've been talking to a guy who's a lead singer in a pretty famous band right now. He has paranormal experiences. There's when I talked to Eddie Money, he said, hey, I've never really had anything weird happen, but I've heard all kinds of stories about weird stuff happening. So it's not an uncommon thing.
Right.
But it gets even worse when you get into the point where you're getting on the road and you're traveling and you're staying in all these different places and all these energies are behind. Is there any stories that you've been able to collect from bands that are on the road that have maybe stayed in like a haunted hotel or a haunted motel or something?
Not in particular, but I do know from experience. We were on the road this summer, and we were kind of in the border of New York. We were kind of in like the Saratoga Valley area in the middle of the night, and I felt that eeriness feeling there.
Well, that whole area,
it was
that's your Sleepy Hollow area.
Yeah, real dark feeling. But
There's probably a lot of places like that where, if you're, especially Ross, you
Yeah.
go out looking at, I don't know, Dan, if you do any investigating, outside of having these experience in the music world,
Right.
but you pick up a sensitivity to these things.
yeah.
I've picked up a lot of stories, and one thing trying to remember. There's a band, someone who has a friend of mine that's got a lot of stories. There's a straight edge band from Erie, Pennsylvania, of all places, and it is a little eerie out there.
That was a good show too.
Yeah,
So was Erie, Indiana.
he's got a lot of stories. He had this great one I love that in Pittsburgh there was a family he knew or something, and they had a grand piano. And what's creepy is the way he tell the story. He's like, in the middle of the night they heard it playing. He goes, ragtime piano down in the basement, which is kind of freaky. He had a lot of stories, even in his own house. He said there was something in the attic. He went outside and looked up, and
right.
there was a light on and a window open. And he's like, well, how on earth did that happen? He went up, shut the window, put the light out, went back out. It was on again. And, this was after his wife or someone had thought she saw someone in the hallway. And I guess he went up in the attic and he said, listen, he goes, whatever you are, you can stay up here, but I can't have this window open. And it was freezing out there. And it never happened again. But, I mean, he straight out, he's like, man, I'm telling you, I went out there. I just shut that light off. I mean, it was right back on. The window was open again. And, I've been in the Amityville house twice.
Wait, hold on, what?
Yeah, the house on Long Island.
You've been there?
Yeah, all from touring.
Just like walking by outside?
I've walked right in front of it. I've stood on the front lawn.
I'm very jealous.
It was amazing. And
Also, I should warn you, you can't say that word on this show.
why?
Oh, that's right. Things happen.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
everything's already
man.
gone wrong tonight already.
Great.
So, but
Give me an
usually
example of what happens so I know what to look out
we've
for.
completely had the broadcast cut out when we've talked about it
Because you said that.
because we said the A word. Oh yeah, we've had computers shut down. I'll tell you my creepy Amityville story.
All right.
So, Jackie Barrett, who is a psychic who works with Ronnie DeFeo, the Amityville murderer.
Right.
She wrote a book with him.
He was one of the children.
He was the oldest one, the one that they think committed all the murders of the DeFeos.
Oh, the DeFeo family.
DeFeos
You're not
before
talking about the Lutz who moved in afterwards.
the DeFeos at first.
Okay.
So she wrote this book with him, and originally I was going to help work on that, and it turns out that Jackie said, no, I got to just do this myself.
Right.
And so we had her on the show to promote it when it first came out, and she said, I have a message for you from Ronnie.
What?
And I said, what? Ronnie DeFeo has a message for me? And he said, yeah, he warned you to stop, looking into this because it knows about you. And I'm like, wait, what?
Wow.
Whatever evil things there knows about my interest in the Amityville case and has been reaching out to us. So when we talk about it, that's what it is. And we've actually had one of the Lutz kids on the show,
Well,
too.
I'll tell you this. That's amazing. You had one of them on.
Good friend of mine.
Is there somewhere I can listen to it? Sometime?
Oh, yeah. It's
That's-
on SpookySouthCoast.com. It's on YouTube. Yeah.
There were times often where I wondered, like, right after I had visited it for the first time, there was just things that I was kind of like, wow, I wonder if it was connected to me going to check it out. But the thing that got me about it that I tell everybody is how painfully normal the neighborhood looked. In the movies, they portray it like it's way off. I mean, you've seen the movie, like it's out in the woods, isolated, right near the water. This is like right up against the street, up against the sidewalk. The houses are all next to each other. It is in no way isolated.
Which is why the neighbors hate all the publicity.
Yeah, well, do you know they signed an ordinance? You can't go looking at. You go sightseeing there, they can give you a ticket.
Yep.
And me and my friend were very well planned out. Both times we went, I said, this is what we're gonna do. We there's a pizza place or something, a laundromat or something at the end of the road, and we parked there. I said, we're just going to walk by because there are people walking around, like,
sure, yeah.
like people
just
that
a
live in the
regular
neighborhood.
Residential neighborhood, sure.
And it was like the same thing. I saw the Jackson 5 house once, which has nothing to do with this, but I saw where they grew up.
Now, that might be weird with me.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But again, it was funny how, I just remember kids jumping rope in front of the house and people walking their dogs, and nobody cared that the Jackson 5 grew up there. But anyway, I said, let's just walk by casually. Just walk by, take a look at it. And I had a camera on me, and I kind of like put my hand up and really casually took a quick picture,
shot,
just snuck it back in my pocket. I have the picture, and it was a lot of fun. To me too, it goes beyond the ghost. That's my childhood. Like I was all into that stuff, and it was fun as much as it was scary. It was very fun. But yeah, I saw it twice. It was a trip to be able to see it.
So you're gonna want to give Dan some of the archives, some of the videos.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna.
Let me tell you, we've talked to Jackie Barrett, we have talked to Chris Lutz, we have talked to Laura Davidian, who was the journalist that chronicled the story in the newspaper. Right. We've talked to Ryan Katzenbach, who's made documentaries about it. We've had a lot of shows about the A word on the show over the years.
Two quick questions before if you don't mind.
Sure.
DeFeo, what I can't remember because I've seen so many different interviews with all these people. Where does he stand? Did he say that there was something demonic that possessed him, or did he say it was a joke?
They did at first try to portray that. No, because they tried to say that he didn't commit the murders,
right?
But they did try to say that there was some sort of negative thing in the house. Right. They got away from that over the years.
Okay.
And now, since he started working with Jackie, it's come back up as being like there definitely is some sort of negative entity there.
Question number 2: because a lot of people have accused George Lutz of making up the whole thing, right? That pitch. You ever seen the picture with the kid peering over the railing?
Right, which is, from what I understand, is more than likely because that was from an investigation that the Warrens conducted.
Right.
And that's more than likely it's probably the investigator that was there that night. And
really?
there was one investigator there that was with him. So the ghost boy photo might not be legit, but it might be.
Regardless, where so many people have accused George of making it up, where the child that you had in here, or that or whatever, where does this person stand? What does he say something was going on when he lived there?
From what Chris has told me, and I've talked a little bit to Danny too, and I've seen Danny's documentary, who's the other brother. Right. From what I understand is Chris says that the stuff that went on is far worse than what they portrayed. That George was fully inviting these things into the house. Right. That it was, what we saw in the movie and in the book might have been made up or might have been fabricated or what have you, but that they were having horrifying experiences because he was dabbling in all this stuff and he invited it all into the house. So excuse me, if you have somebody that's into all of this stuff already, and you're moving into a house where these murders just occurred, and these murders might have been influenced by some sort of dark entity, you know, it's all kind of coming in a confluence of evil that's leading to all these problems.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely one of my favorite topics. We could go all night on Amityville.
Oh, yeah.
We'll definitely have to do that sometime.
Yes.
But one of the things that I was thinking of is there have you ever heard of a case of one particular song drawing out? Because, you know, we go to investigations and we'll hear, oh, you know, when you play this song, the spirits act up. And so we'll bring recordings of that song and try to use that as a way to kind of help something manifest. Have you ever heard of a song when a particular song is played, that is when activity is stirred up?
I've heard of Stairway to Heaven.
I was going to say, because,
you know, usually at midnight. I always kind of thought it was more of like a urban legend, but, you know, I can't say that I haven't tried it myself, and it's definitely.
Listen, if I'm
things
driving,
have gotten weird.
If I'm driving down the road late at night, that song comes on, and I'm by myself, I turn the channel.
Yeah.
There's a lot surrounding that song, huh?
Yeah, there's been a lot of stories,
Wow.
and what's funny is, you know, the story has come about that the song was written by the devil. That you know, it was kind of just either depending on the story. Different stories that I've heard is that you know, Jimmy Page bought the house that Aleister Crowley lived in.
I was just telling her that the other day.
And that he may have been doing automatic writing where he just laid there and he, you know, kind of just let the pen flow and the words came through. Robert Plant has said that that's not the, you know, he's come out and said, you know, I remember sitting there in the sessions and going back and forth, you know, stuff that we put in, stuff that we took out. Then it turns out they probably stole the whole song from another band anyway, because that's what Led Zeppelin did. Yeah. But so there's all these stories that are out there that is, and I always believed that as a kid. You know, so I was like, there's a chance that this song was written by the devil, and it would freak me out. When I was in college at UMass Dartmouth, this might get a little... I used to have to use the bathroom, and I used to like to go to the 4th floor of the library because it was the least populated bathroom. I can go have some privacy. So I would go and I would grab a book, and I flagged the book. Anybody that watched Seinfeld, the book was flagged. But there was a book that I just happened to grab one day, and it was stories about pop culture instances where there was the occult. Right. And it was different songs that were said to have been written by the devil. And in this book, it debunked the whole story of Stairway to Heaven being written by the devil, but it said the one song the devil did write was Hotel California.
Which I can't stand.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I can kind of understand that too.
I also look at it, if nothing else, I mean, how whacked out was Jimmy Page that dude had no problem by himself sleeping in that house with Aleister Crowley.
Well, I mean, if you look into Crowley
John
a little
Bonham
bit,
died there, you know.
If you look
Is
into
that the house John Bonham died?
John
Oh, really?
died,
if you look into Crowley though, like a lot of that was gimmick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know, a lot of it was kind of like he just wanted to live this lifestyle where he could do whatever he wanted.
Right.
And just, you know, take whatever he wanted, have sex with whoever he wanted, not suffer any consequences. So you live this lifestyle associated with it. But still, like, that's putting, like we talked about, you're putting out a vibe, you're putting out an energy, and that can have an impact.
And who's to say that the stuff that he tried to invoke didn't actually open something?
Right.
You
I
know?
mean, even though you're just doing it as gimmick, you're still, it's probably worse if you're doing it as gimmick.
Right. Because you really don't know what you're playing with.
Exactly. You know, and so certain songs I think can have an impact on people. Like there's, I remember, I don't even know what it was, but I was a teenager, and I was driving around one of my old beater cars, driving around Marion, going down Point Road in the dark, and I just turned on, I think it was the UMass channel, you know, college radio, and I just hear this song that is, it's like a baby crying, and you know, it's a metal song, but there's like a baby crying in the background, and there's like all this like ominous dark stuff happening in the song, and I was like, whatever this is, if this was daytime, I'd be like, cool, turn it up. But for hearing that song and that moment had just freaked me out to the point where I said, no, none of this. And like I immediately turned around, drove to like where at least there were street lights and people around, and just kind of had to recompose myself, because music can have that effect on you. It certainly can. I mean, that's you know, when a musician makes music, you hope that it has that effect on somebody.
Well, wasn't I believe, didn't you guys have a guest on who talked about certain cultural implications of like satanic imagery and so forth in music and pop culture in the 70s?
Especially where it became, you know, a cottage industry for a while. and that's kind of what we focus on. I can't remember his name, but the book was it Hail to My Sweet Satan?
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the author, but yeah, that was a great, fascinating discussion.
You know, and I think more or less for me, there's certain bands. You know, there's certain bands that if you listen to, like, you know, you brought up the song that you heard on college radio, and you know, even though some people think it's a gimmick, you know, what was the greatest trick the devil ever pulled? Convincing the world he didn't exist.
But there's also some bands too that they have that mystique that mystique eventually wears away.
Right.
You know, like a guy like Alice Cooper had that mystique for a long time, and then you realize, oh, Vince Fernier is actually a really cool guy, and he's nice, and he plays golf.
Right.
So he's not really that evil.
Right.
And you know, Black Sabbath had that reputation for a long time, and it turns out that they're just a bunch of regular guys.
Yeah.
And Judas Priest, you know, Judas Priest is the band where people are playing their records backwards and killing themselves, and you know, you find out like they're just a bunch of dudes.
Right.
So it if you can build up that mystique, sometimes that mystique is carrying that ominous thing.
Right.
And I'm sure as the members of the band, you're saying, like, what is this thing that we've created?
Right.
In some ways it's good because it sells T-shirts and records and concert tickets, but in other ways you're like, what are we doing here? What is the messages that we're sending here?
Yeah.
Right.
But,
you know, and the other part of that is, you know, I think one of the biggest examples of music influencing young teens is the case based on the documentary of Paradise Lost, where three teens murdered a female, you know, based on the Slayer song Altar of Sacrifice. You know, and they thought they were invoking some kind of satanic ritual, and it was a pretty brutalized case. You know, and they directly thought the music influenced them, you know, and it's interesting the profound effect that sometimes these things can have on people's minds and thoughts, and it's you know, and I know there was a lot of blame towards the band and towards the songs and whatnot. Not that I necessarily agree with it, but it's interesting that that's kind of what they pointed out as their motive on top of it.
Well, but that being the case too, like, you know, Tipper Gore and that whole crew is always looking to find any kind of thing that they can in the music. Like I remember the Judas Priest trial when the kid had killed himself. You know, they said that when they played the record backward, the phrase that came across was, "Hey mom, my chair is broken."
Yeah.
Like, what does that have to do with anything?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, just because you can make out words doesn't mean that. Don't worry, that's not haunted.
Right.
That's,
Right.
that's just
You read my mind. I'm like, wow, who's doing that?
Well, you know,
it's
and
the Amityville computer.
Yeah.
well, you know, and there was the other case with Ozzy and Suicide Solution. You
Right.
know? You know, there was that lawyer who swore that he was saying, "Get the gun, get the gun,"
And that's still, I mean, that still weighs on Ozzy's conscience to this day. You know.
I always love the video though of where they show that, and Ozzy just stops for a minute. And he's like, "Get the bleeping gun, man!" And he's speechless.
We've done entire shows too where, God rest his soul, our Gary Patterson used to come on. We talk about rock and roll legends and curses, and we would talk about the Beatles and all the backwards, the backmasking that they would do and that stuff. So we only have a few minutes left. I want to say, give me the best story that you've collected, if or at least the next best one if you've already shared it with us.
So,
I mean, getting your head smashed in by a ghost is pretty bad. But
so we were up in the attic of the old cafeteria one time, and we were just doing some, you know, like precursor EVP questions, and it was midnight. We were asking to have something make its presence known. I went up into the little front corner room, and I just started taking photos, and I immediately saw, like, I guess it could be more described as like a small, like, golem-looking creature, like trying to push into a door that wasn't there.
wow.
Later on, we went into the front room, and we noticed that there was a locked door from the opposite side. So the door was locked from the inside, and there was a mirror, a stand-up mirror facing the door. One of the things that I had doing research at that time, when you're trying to invoke a portal, you face a mirror towards a door. Later on that evening, we were there, and I remember we were asking it questions, and it was like the sound of 1,000 things scratching on the ceiling, and it was so loud and terrifying. I think almost just, you know, like Scooby-Doo beat feet and but, and you know, I can laugh about it now, but I mean, this was a very terrifying experience.
That's
you know,
like when you're a band and you hear something like that, you're like, oh, okay, let's play like Happy Birthday now.
yes.
You know, let's switch gears a little bit
Yes.
here. We only have a few minutes left. Let everybody know about the band, how they can
Sure.
find out more information, where they can go and see you.
Sure. So, so there's two bands. So both of us have that we're in together, and we're co-joined by a couple different members. The first band is Branch Davidian. You can visit us on our webpage on Facebook, Branch Davidian.
I was gonna say,
Band.
Like, do you ever get like weird emails from anybody?
Yes,
or-
from time to time.
Yeah, we've had,
especially recently with all the movies.
and
Sure,
we can
yeah.
see our viewership going up
yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah. You can find our music on Bandcamp at Branch Davidian on bandcamp.com. The other band is Medjugorje, named after the village in.
We should probably spell it because
Yeah,
that's
I was
a
gonna
hard
say
one.
you
Go
wanna
ahead.
Yeah,
spell that one.
it's named after the
Yes.
village.
Go ahead, Dan.
Croatian Bosnia area. Medjugorje, Medjugorje, and that band. What I would suggest is if you go to YouTube, we have a video. The song's called "Spoils of War." I would look that up because that's kind of right now where both bands are riding on like the success of that video. It was well put together. It's just a performance video that we filmed, and but you look up that, and you probably find some related videos of Branch Davidian and stuff like that. Some shows where both bands are on the same bill, so I would strongly suggest looking that up.
So I'm just gonna assume your music is actually better than David Koresh's, though, right?
Yeah. For
Dave-
sure.
David Koresh, who spent some time in New Bedford.
Right.
Did he
Oh,
really?
I'll
Really?
tell you that story off the
Wow.
air.
And
I heard it on Chris McCarthy's show.
Oh,
I can't take
interesting.
credit, but
Wow.
we still got a couple. We got a minute.
we have 1 minute.
You can also find our music right here in New Bedford at Purchase Street Records.
Nice.
Oh yeah,
Visit,
yeah.
visit Roger. He has copies of the Medjugorje album and T-shirts and.
And just go in there anyway, even if you don't
Yeah,
want to check
give
our
them the
stuff
local
out.
business,
Roger's
so-
been a big help to us over the years.
Go,
so.
yeah, huge supporter of all local music.
Yeah.
Great friend of this show.
Yeah.
Go into Purchase Street Records. Tell Roger that you heard about it on Spooky South Coast, and I guarantee you he will not give you a discount. Because did you see he had Chip Zanoff in there the other when Enough's Enough? There was Dizzy Reed had a band and Chip Zanoff was in the band. So Chip goes into Purchase Street Records and goes to buy one of the Enough's Enough records, and somebody wrote underneath it to Roger, "Did you give him a discount?" And Roger just writes, "No," because that's Uncle Roger.
Yes.
All right, well, we are out of time. We will be back next week. I know next week I have wrestling down the street here at the VFW Hall, so you can come out and check that out as well. It'll be for a good cause. All of those House of Brick shows are for fundraisers, for great causes. So come on out and see me do the ring announcer thing, and then get home in time for Spooky South Coast, because we are going to be talking about the paranormal. We'll have some more guests in as well. If you need to reach us at any point during the week, spookycrew at SpookySouthCoast.com. Follow along with everything that we do on YouTube, on the Spooky South Coast app. Wherever you can find podcasts, you will find Spooky South Coast. We appreciate all the love and support that we get from everybody here as we are now in year 13. Big things are happening. So until next week, for everybody involved, I'm Tim. Stay spooktacular.